Hello, welcome to The Exhausted Programmer. My name is Alexander, and today, let's make a game. Making a game today is easier than it's ever been. There's a lot of tools out there that are free to download or comes with some licensing fee that won't charge you anything until you start making money. There's also a ton of tutorials online, and any game idea that you can think of, I'm sure there's a YouTube video out there to help you get started on your way. Today's video is just to demonstrate a minimum viable product, plus showing how easy it is just to get a game up and running. The game we're going to make is going to be very bare bones, but with just a little bit of creativity, we can turn it into a number of genres very easily. In fact, I hope to make this a video series where we make updates to this game in short videos just to show how little increments can be useful in getting to an end result. There are a lot of tools that we could use, but today we're going to focus on using Sprite to get our art and Godot as our game engine. A game engine is a tool that can be useful for simulating gravity and physics and collision. We will use collision in this example today, but first we need things to collide. So let's start with making the characters. To make our video game, let's first make the characters. We're going to use Sprite, create a new file. Don't worry about the settings, just hit OK. Make sure we have the right color. We zoom in, and let's start with the head. An ellipse tool, and then the pencil for the body, some legs, and some arms. And I'm just going to go ahead and do that, and there is our main character. If we save this with Control S, there we can keep it. We can then go ahead and export it as a sprite sheet. We want to make sure we tell it what the output file would be, and we can click here. It's going to put it in our documents folder. That's going to be useful to know where to get it for the next program, but we can go ahead and hit export. Then we can go ahead and make our second character, which is supposed to be the villain, so we're just going to give this guy horns. There you go. Quite villainous. And again, we need to export this, but we want to give it a different name so it doesn't overwrite our previous one. So we're just going to call it 2, and it will be in that same documents folder, and we can export it, and there's our characters. The other program we're going to use to make this game is Godot. Again, download it. It's open source. It's free. You get it on your computer. You start it up. First thing you want to do is cancel out of this pop-up. We don't need to import anything. We're going to create everything from new. And let's create a new project. There seems to be a little issue with screen capturing some of these pop-ups, so I'll just put pictures over this to show that we need to name the project, create the folder. When starting in Godot, you get this empty 3D field, but we're going to make a 2D game, so we can go ahead and click 2D. We know that there's going to be a character, so let's go ahead and create what is called a node. When you click this button, you're given a list of all the nodes possible, and if we just search for character, there is one called character body 2D. If we select that, we get what we want. Right now we don't see anything and there's no input taken. This is more of a concept of a character, and so let's give it some of the aspects to define this character, such as how it looks. We can click on the character 2D, character body 2D, and in fact I'm just going to go ahead and click again so I can name this player. We're going to add an animated sprite using the same searchable system. And again, I will try to put an image over this so that we can see what I'm doing since the screen capture is not working. Also at this point, it's worth mentioning that we go to our documents folder where we save those sprites, and we put those sprite files, the PNG files, into the folder that was created when we created this project. With our handcrafted PNG files now in the project, with this animated sprite 2D, we can come over here, click on animation, sprite frames, new sprite frames, click it one more time to make a menu pop up down here. This allows us to set the default sprite for this character. We do that with this add frames from sprite sheet. Sprite sheet was the term used in Sprite, but we're not really using it in that way. But a sprite sheet can be the same character in multiple different poses all in one file, which makes animating a lot easier. But we just have the one image for each character. We select the one we want. we change the horizontal and verticals to 1 and 1, and then click the box to add the one frame. Now we have an image, but this character doesn't do anything, and it does not interact with anything. So let's first add what is called collision. Again, we select the player, we hit the Add Child Node button, and we look for the word collision to get the collision shape 2D. And when we create that, we need to define the shape. And it's really easy if we zoom in first, go to shape. We'll do a rectangle shape. This is purely preference, but this allows us to quickly define the boundaries in which we will determine this character exists. For a later demonstration, I'm going to have the head not fully covered, but for now, this works. It is worth noting that if you're creating some sort of shooter game, you might want to make your player character a little bit smaller than the sprite, and the enemy character is a little bit bigger than the sprite in order for perceived fairness in gameplay. Now that we have the player character, we do want to go ahead and save this. So Control S and a pop-up, you can just save it. It will save it as whatever you named the node up here unless you change it. And now let's do similar for the enemy character. So we need a new object here, which will start with the node, the same character body 2D. This one I'm going to name enemy, and we want to add an animated sprite. Yes, we only have one image for both of these characters, but in the future we might want to add animation, so it's good to just have this there. We do the same thing. We go to animation, new sprite frame, click it one more time, and this time we make sure we select the correct PNG file. We go back to 1 and 1, select it, add one frame, and we have the look. Now we need the interaction. So another collision 2D, collision shape 2D, and I'm going to just do it the same way with the square or rectangle. And again, we're going to let the head not be fully covered for demonstration purposes later. Control S and save. Finally, we need them to exist together, and for that we want a world. So we'll add a new scene, call it an actual scene. This one we're just going to call world, and we'll add now, instead of adding a new child node, we're going to instantiate a child scene. But if you notice, it looks like chains connected together. We're just chaining some of our things together here. So first I'm going to Control S to give this the name world, and then we can select our player, we can select our enemy, and with these two added, we can also maybe move them around a little bit. So the enemy can be here, the player can be here. If we hit this play button up here, we will start to see our game. So go ahead and select current. Here we see our two characters, but they're not moving, they're not doing anything. They're also pretty small. These are all things we can fix at a later time. But for the sake of this being a game, I think we should add some inputs. So if we hit F8, it will close out the window and we can keep going. So if we want to tell Godot what the inputs will be, we need to go into the project settings found in the project tab, project settings. Once there, we can select the input map tab, click on the add new action box, and when we type in something here, it's to define what the input represents. So let's go ahead and put in the move up, move down commands, but this alone doesn't tell it what it needs to do on its own. Once we have these in there, we can then go to the right and hit the plus sign and tell it what characters we want to put in. All you have to do is hit the plus, hit the key you want, I'll hit W, and then click OK at the bottom. Hitting Enter or Alt or Shift or anything like that will adjust the key pressing, so make sure you're only hitting the key you want. And if you want to add multiple ones, you can just hit the plus sign again beside the input, and that will allow you to put in another key for the same command. So here I'll do the up on the cursor, and now they are both listed. Now I'm just going to use the WASD keys for this, get rid of the cursor key, go ahead and get back to our main window here, now we need to let Godot know that this input, so when we hit W, is going to call the action move up. But what does move up mean? Well, here is where we get into a little bit of programming. First, let's select our player, and then we want to click this button here that attaches a script to this node. When we do this, there's a lot of options here. If you have the template on or off, it doesn't really matter. Once we create it, we want to be left with just this top line here. If you have a template on, it might have more stuff below it. You can just delete all that. Godot is looking for a function, which the functions are defined with the keyword func. It's looking for one called physics process that takes in a delta value, which we may use later, but in order to say we're not using it now, we'll put an underscore before the word delta, and then we go on to define what we want to happen in the physics processing. We need to define a direction for the character. So if we go ahead and define it as direction, we can then tap into pre-built code, such as the input, which has a bunch of child functions and other definitions that we could dig into if we wanted to, but we don't want to right now. But one of them is to get a vector. Now, it might feel like we can just put these in any order we want to, or maybe we want to do it the order it's listed, but it's specifically looking for these values in a specific order. The first thing it wants to know is what do we expect to come in for when we move left, or for the left direction, and we titled it move left, so we can hit down, select it, put a comma, and then we can do the next one. So the next one is right, the next one is up, and the next one is down. And I do not have this memorized. You can actually look it up into the documentation, but also we see that there's some pop-up text which maybe, depending on your resolution, would be easier to see. But I have it zoomed in quite a bit in order for better readability on YouTube. If we go ahead and start the next line, we'll take that direction to give us a velocity. And if you didn't take physics or you spent a long time, velocity is a direction and a speed. And we're just going to say 600. We could call it whatever we want. We could define speed elsewhere and just times it by the speed. That way we can adjust all the speed values at the same time. Just different options for the same thing. And then there is a built-in function in Godot called move and slide that will help us move our character and have it slide around. So we want to save this, Control S, and then if we hit the F5 button again, we should see our character moving. So back to our screen with the small characters, but now if we hit the WASD keys, our character moves as expected. And if you remember back when we did the collision boxes, you can see that we can go a bit into the enemy because we didn't define the collision box to cover our entire head, but we can't go through the enemy because the collision boxes do collide. And there we go, a game where you have a character you move, a character that doesn't move, and we could add so much more to this, including weapons or AI, more enemies, better backgrounds, animations of our characters, each one of these small little increments to make this game a better game. So now we have a video game, maybe the most minimum video game there can be, but we can add in a bunch of stuff after the fact. We could add in more enemies, different types of enemies, different environments. We could add music, we could add animation. There's so much that could be added from this standpoint that we could go in any number of directions. If you have some specific direction you would like me to look into, just feel free to leave comments below, or stay tuned for the next video where we will continue to improve this game. Thank you for watching.